Hey everyone, welcome to LS1's Garage channel. I'm Ben. As for today, I'm on a very long drive, so I figured this would be a good time to make a video since time is a little limited. This video is going to be a little bit about what the shock-in test is, and shock-in is just another word for your inspection, your vehicle inspection, and a little bit of story time about my personal experiences in it. What the requirements are, what can pass you, what can fail you, those kind of things. First of all, you always hear these rumors like cars have to, at a certain year, they can't be driven in Japan anymore, at a certain amount of kilo, they can't be driven anymore. Well, of course, that's not true. I'm going to tell you kind of why that rumor got started about those cars here in Japan, because the test is quite difficult compared to what you might have in the U.S. So a little bit about the shock-in test. What do they check? Well, they check your emissions. They check for rust. They check tires. They check wipers. They check wiper motors. If you have any lights on the front or back, they all need to work. It doesn't matter if they're fog lights that don't work. They must work. They check suspension boots for being loose or grease coming out of them, see if the axle's torn with boot, anything like that. I mean, they can fail you for almost anything. You need to have all your lug nuts. It's actually kind of quite interesting when you go through it. They'll do a e-brake test, and they'll do kind of a suspension test, and then they, have an alignment machine that checks the alignment of your headlights. That's often where people fail. If there is any rust underneath that's substantial, you will fail. And you can get it fixed and checked, and sometimes, if it's fixed properly, they'll go ahead and pass it. If it's failed, if it's pretty serious, then you won't be able to pass it anymore. Sometimes they fail you beyond repair, and then you can't pass because of that. A couple other things: if your tires stick out further than the wheel hub, you will fail. I failed from cracked windshield before. Windshield, little tiny crack, you fail. It's quite a tough test, and anytime you're going in, you don't really know what to expect. Just like any kind of inspection, it just depends on who you get that's inspecting your vehicle. I wouldn't say what we call it. It's called the Rikun Kyoku, is the place where we go to get the inspection done. It's like an inspection building, and all the cars are going through the building getting the inspection done. Same place that you get your registration and your tags and all that kind of stuff too. But like I said, it's quite difficult. They have it for motorcycles, cars, everything. I think anything above 249cc needs to have inspection as far as motorcycles go. Anything below doesn't need it. They have a separate building for the smaller cars, your K cars. They're a separate entity, and they do their own separate kind of inspection, which is a little bit different. Somewhat similar, but it's actually quite easy. So that being said, you can see why if a car has a small oil leak in the pan, that has to be repaired, right? They're not going to let you pass it. So people are always saying, well, why do cars have 40, 50,000 kilo and they're being sold as scrap? Well, look at it like this. Your road tax in Japan for a 300 plate car, which would be like a Silvia with a 2-liter engine, is going to be about, I believe I paid roughly about 50,000 yen, which is about $450 or so a year for my road tax. Okay, your vehicle inspection is good for 2 years on small cars. Well, I wouldn't say small cars, all cars. If it's a truck, 2 ton or over, it's only good for 1 year. But for small cars or cars in general, it's good for 2 years. So your road tax is going to be about $450 a year. Okay, the inspection on a car is going to cost you about, with the insurance, because insurance is provided through the government that you pay for. That's called jibaiseki. It's going to cost you about, let's just say on the easy side, $500. Okay, so to drive a car that you've probably paid off, okay, and that's going to cost you in 1 year, you're looking at about $1,300 or so to drive it for 2 years. That's with your road tax paid and your inspection. $1,300. Okay, so you've had this car forever, you've been driving it forever. It's a pretty good car, but it's not perfect, it's not new. Okay, so you've got a oil pan gasket that's leaking. Well, in Japan, most people don't repair their own cars, they take it to have it repaired. And in Japan, everything is expensive. So you take it to have it repaired, they say, oh, this is gonna cost you $1,200 to repair your oil pan. Okay, so you had to add the cost up. You've got $1,300 to drive the car for another 2 years, plus a new $1,200. Wow, you're looking at $2,500 to drive a car that's been paid off. It's probably not worth $2,500. So in that situation, what most people do is they use that $2,500, they scrap their old car, and they go buy a new car that gets an inspection for 3 years from new, right? So that's where you'll see a lot of cars coming through that don't really have big problems, but they've been scrapped or, you know, thrown away. Sometimes they'll have a transmission problem. Well, you know, that's $3,000, $2,000, and, you know, the person's like, well, you know, that's almost $4,000, $5,000 to drive a car that, you know, I can put $5,000 towards a new car. You know, this thing's not even worth $5,000. Well, there you go. If it has rust, like I said before, if it has rust, that's another big issue, and people just usually just don't want to worry about fixing it. Sometimes it's not even fixable, and they just throw the car away. So all that being said, that is the shock-in test. That's the inspection test. So some experiences I've had, I believe 2 months back, 2 or 3 months back, the government had allowed vehicles in Japan that the shock-in had expired, the inspection had expired, to continue driving because of the coronavirus. So that was kind of a freebie for everybody. So I had 3 or 4 vehicles that had the inspection had finished, and so all at once they needed to be inspected. I think it was 5. I have 1,000cc motorcycle, the safety loader truck that we're driving now, 1 big car, and 2 K cars. Okay, so every car almost had a problem. Unforeseen issue. The first one was my small Sambar K van, right? No problems, always drove fine. It did have a small oil pan gasket leak, right? And I didn't really feel like fixing it. It was a very slow leak, and it was not an issue realistically, but it had been leaking over some time, right? So what I did was, and this is the same thing that usually everybody does, is you just go and get a steamed power washer, spray it clean underneath, and then run through the inspection, right? And that is exactly what I did. However, the van still failed. And the reason it failed is because there was a tiny chip in the right side mirror, and it had a small crack. Very unnoticeable. It has big mirrors, you probably would never even notice it. And because of that, it failed, right? And they told me when I was pulling up to the line, oh, it's already failed, before I even went through the test, right? And what they'll normally do is come out before you go inside the building to take the test and do a lights check and everything like that. They'll open the hood or the cover for the engine and look at the engine from the top to see if anything's leaking, those kind of things. Everything's hooked up right. That's before they look under the vehicle. Normally when they look under the vehicle, they'll put it on some kind of lift, or there'll be somebody in a pit that looks under the vehicle. Anyhow, so I'd already failed. So I went through the rest of the test, and I passed the test. And what I had done was I went back to my friend's place, who has a few Sambar trucks, and I just swapped the mirror out with, it wasn't even the same kind of mirror, just swapped it out with another smaller mirror, went right back up there and passed, right? Okay, so, shoot, that one's done, right? You always worry about emissions, or if they're gonna find something, you know. In that case, I was kind of weary about that mirror, but I thought, nah, you know what? You know, my friend even told me, a Japanese person, that, oh yeah, you'll pass with that. But of course you didn't, because it really depends on the person who sees it. So anyway, that was vehicle number 1. The second was a car that I daily drive, and it's kind of a newer car. I believe it's a 2016 model. And it didn't really fail because of anything. The car has virtually no kilo. It's you know, 15,000 kilos, something like that, because it's virtually new. But when I went through, I did learn something. The car had hubcaps on it, And when I went through the inspection, it's also a K car. They said, oh, you're gonna have to remove your hubcaps. I'll remove my hubcaps because they want to tap on the lug nuts. I don't know what tapping on the lug nuts does. I guess if it falls out, then it fails, but it really makes no sense to me. But they have these little hammers, and they go through and they tap all your lug nuts. So I had to pull all the hubcaps off of it, which wasn't a big deal, and it passed fairly easy. But it was something I learned about that. So there's 2 cars down. The third car is a Nissan Premiere, and I was doing the inspection for a friend of mine. He's an older man, and he really doesn't know anything about cars, so I was helping him out. Before his inspection, I went under the car just to check it out, and he had a CV axle that was torn and it was throwing grease everywhere. Okay, so that's a problem for the inspection. It cannot pass like that. So I knew that, so I went ahead and fixed that, and then, of course, power washed the underneath of the chassis where the oil and grease and all that was, so that it would look clean and it would pass inspection. Like I was saying before, if he didn't have me to help him, and he was going to pay someone to do that, in Japan, to change the CV axle is going to cost about $700 or $800. That's not including the part. Things are just very expensive when it comes to those kind of things. So I went ahead and did it for him for almost nothing, just the parts and labor. Maybe he paid like 10,000 yen or something like that. That's like $100. Anyway, so I went ahead and did that, sprayed it off. It was all clean, and he didn't really have any issues when the car went through. The only thing that they said, I took it through the inspection. The only thing that they said was there was a TV, and a lot of Japanese people do this. They put TVs on their dashes, they put TVs on the windshield, like a little, suction cup with the TV on it. He had done that, and it was right there in the center area of the windshield, and they said, oh, you're going to fail if you don't take that down. That's blocking your view. Again, that's something I didn't know, and so I pulled that down, and that wasn't a big deal. Okay, so that's 3 cars down. Everything is going pretty well. Now here's where it gets interesting. So all I have left is a 1000cc motorcycle and my safety loader. My safety loader always passes. It's a year inspection. It is the most expensive one. The insurance, the forced insurance by the government with the test and everything runs a little bit over $600 a year. This is because it's an older truck. It's about 2006 model. And I forget where the age range is, but once it gets past a certain year model, and I don't know if this is for cars too, but this is another reason why people buy new cars here. Once it gets past a certain year model, it gets more expensive every year or every 2 years to re-register it. That's because they kind of want to force you to buy new cars. They kind of want to fade out older vehicles on the road. Now, if you really want it, you really love it, then you're going to have to pay for it to be there, right? So that's just something that they do. So if it were the same model truck, but 2015 model or 2016 model or something like that, maybe it'll be $350 or $400 instead of $600 plus. Okay, that's fine. So I figured this truck would pass pretty easy. There were a few little things. I put new taillights on it because one was broke and things like that. Just made sure all the lights worked, and of course I didn't really have any oil leaks or anything like that, but I went ahead and sprayed the bottom chassis anyway because it gets quite dirty doing this job. I go through, and to my surprise, first of all, before I even entered, they did all the lights checks and everything like that, and they asked you to pull the cab up. It's cab over truck, so I pulled the cab up and they check underneath. So okay, it's fine. There was a tiny, I mean, not the size of my pinky, chip in the glass. That chip had been there. I had this truck almost 6-7 years. That chip had been in there since I bought this truck, and it had never gotten bigger. And of course, because of that, it failed. They told me right away, oh, that chip is too big, it's gonna fail. They have these little glass kits that you can fill the glass and cover it up and all that kind of stuff. And they asked me, has it been sealed? And I said, well, I really don't know, but I will check. It's never cracked any further than what it is. So I thought, okay, well, I'll get that seal kit and I'll fix it. So that was one of the problems with the truck. The other problem was the outer tie rod end was a little loose, and actually he had brought me down underneath the truck to see it, and he's like, oh, and the boot is a little torn, and he had like a little hook thing, and when he grabbed the boot, Of course, it ripped, and he ripped it with the hook, but it was fine. I was gonna have to replace the tie rod in it anyway. So those are the two problems with the truck. So I think for about 50 bucks, I got the outer tie rod end, and I got the little glass seal kit. I was a little worried that the seal kit wasn't going to quite work, so I went ahead and bought a whole new glass, and it wasn't really that much. It was like $100, you know, because these trucks are pretty common here in Japan. And so I had that separate, and I thought, well, if the sealer works, at least I'll have a backup glass, because I'm going to have to change it anyway. I don't want to have to deal with this stuff again next year if they, you know, you'll get some different person that say, oh, it has a chip in the glass, you know, so, but I needed to go ahead and get the truck done. So the parts came in, I went ahead and put the sealer in the glass, and it looked a little better, not much, but you know, you could tell. And then I changed the tie rod in. I went back up for the inspection, and the funny thing is, the wipers on the truck were working perfectly the first time it went through the inspection. Now, when you go back through the inspection the second time, you get 3 tries. And if you fail all those times, then you have to here's the way the system works. For example, if you fail for the glass, when you go back again through, they only check the glass. Okay, oh, the glass failed again. Okay, back again the third time, they'll only check the glass again. Now, if you fail all 3 times, you have to pay a little bit of money. I think it's like $20 or $30, and you'll go back through the test again, starting over 1 through 3. But if you go back through it again after the 3rd try, say your 4th try, they'll re-inspect everything again. Okay, so went back up on my 2nd try, and so he checks the glass again. It was keep in mind, it was a sunny day, and I'll explain why that matters later. It was a sunny day, and he checked the glass again, and he said, no, it's not good enough. It looks like it hasn't been fixed. And I showed him a picture where I'd fixed it, and apparently that still wasn't good enough, so the truck failed for the glass again. The tie rod end wasn't a big deal. It passed on that one. So we're still stuck with the glass. Well, luckily, I had ordered that glass, right? It's about 10 a.m. in the morning when this happened. And the other glass had showed up the day before. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to the shop, and I'm going to change the front glass on this truck. The great thing about this truck, this model of truck, and some K trucks also, like your Sambar truck, I believe is the same. I think Daihatsu trucks are the same. The glass is not glued in on the windshield. It's got like some kind of rubber strip that holds it into place. So if you push hard on it enough, yeah, you'll probably crack the glass, but it will just push out. If you're careful, you can get the glass out and save the rubber, and then you can put the other glass back in without having to cut anything, you know, any kind of a sealer off or anything like that. So I went back to the shop, and within about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I had the new glass in, which was quite lucky. At this time, the sunny day had kind of gone away, and it was kind of raining a little bit. Well, for whatever reason, my truck, the wipers had decided to stop working. Okay, so they'd already checked the wipers, and they had passed. But if I tried to go through there again, and the wipers weren't working, they'll say, hey, well, now the wipers aren't working, even though it's something they'd already checked. So it's kind of one of those timing things. So before I went up to go through the building, I wiped off the window real good. I eventually figured out what the problem was on the wipers, but at that time they weren't working, so I had to wipe off the glass real good with a towel, and then I tried to go through and kind of pull under the awning. They have a little awning that sticks out a little bit underneath the building. Just pull under the awning real good and keep the rain from getting on the glass, you know, so they could check it. And when I pulled up, I said, hey, I fixed the glass, and they looked and they were like, what? It's only been 2 hours. And they didn't believe me. And they called the supervisor over, and I said, well, where's the crack if you don't believe me? You know, if there's no crack, then there's no problem anyway. And they checked the inside of the glass, and they checked the model of the glass, and said, there's no way you can change it in 2 hours. Well, I already had the glass ready, and I knew how to do it, so that's how I got it done. But from there, the truck passed, which was lucky. They never figured out that the wipers weren't working at that time, so I got lucky there. So, now we got 4 vehicles down. Still got 1 more to go. One of the worst. So I have a 1000cc motorcycle, and it's been pretty modified. I kind of got it like that, and I've done some things to it myself, and it has a really noisy exhaust on it. before I went up to the inspection, I asked my friend, I said, hey, you know, you're dealing with motorcycles a lot. What's not going to pass on this bike that I need to change? And he looked around, he says, well, the muffler's quite loud. You need to put a silencer in it. You need to have a license plate light, because my bike didn't have a license plate light for whatever reason. And everything else should pass. Now, keep in mind, my turn signals are integrated into my brake light. So they do have signals. They're in the tail light, right? So, and you can blatantly see them whenever they're on, right? And I said, okay, that's fine. And then there's a little tiny light in the very front of the bike that's blue. And he says, oh, you can't have that blue. It has to be a regular color, you know, normal color. Okay, I didn't know that. So, changed that. I put the silencer in, but in Japan, the silencer cannot be bolted. Well, it depends on the prefecture, but in my prefecture, the silencer cannot be bolted. It has to be riveted, right? I guess they don't want you to keep taking it in and out whenever you're doing your inspection. Okay, great. So it had a hole for the silencer bolt, so I went ahead and riveted a rivet inside there so it would be quiet. And it was better, enough to pass, I would say. So I thought, okay, great. So I go up there, and on my first try, well, the headlight wasn't aligned, so it failed. The exhaust went fine. They also failed me because the turn signals were integrated into the tail light. Okay, great. So I thought, what can I do? Well, they have these little shops around the inspection facility that you can pay them a little bit of money and they'll align your headlight, or you can even go through them before you go through the inspection and they'll tell you everything that's wrong. Well, they're a little bit expensive if you're doing the whole thing, but if you're just aligning the headlight, I think I paid $12, right? So I went through there, they aligned the headlight, and then I took the bike back to my garage. I had an old dirt bike that had 2 signals on it, 2 turn signals. So I pulled those off and I bolted them to my bike, and I rewired my turn signals and wired them to those turn signals, and then went back up there. When I went back up there, on my way, the signals on my bike stopped working, and I was like, man, what's going on, you know? Something that I didn't know is that the turn signals from the dirt bike were 6 volt, not 12 volt. So I stopped in another little shop and grabbed a couple of 12 volt bulbs, popped them in there, and went back up to the inspection place. And on the second try, the signals were fine, the exhaust was fine, but the headlight still wasn't lined up. And I had just paid somebody $12 to line the headlight up with the machine. So I went quickly. It's almost 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, they stop everything. It's finished. If you don't pass, you don't pass. Even if you pass, but you don't have time to go inside to get the sticker, too bad, right? So it was about 3:40, something like that. So I run to this little inspection place. They check the headlight, they get it lined back up better, and then I go back through, and it's like 3:50, and they're already closing the stuff down. It's not even 4 o'clock yet. And I said, please, you know, it's not even 4 o'clock. And they said, well, if you fail, you know, are you sure it's right? Because if you fail, you're gonna have to do everything else again. I said, fine, it's fine, let it go through. And luckily this time, the headlight passed. Now, the interesting thing is, on a motorcycle, if you're going through there yourself, you're actually sitting on the motorcycle and you're going through a little track, and you push buttons on the floor, and you push one button on the floor and your back wheel will spin, and they'll say, okay, hit your back brake, and you hit your back brake to stop the back wheel, and then you move forward, and then you push another button and it locks your front wheel into place, and then it checks your headlight. It's kind of interesting. It's a little difficult at first if you're not used to it, but you know, I've gotten used to it by now. Anyway, so it passed, and I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna get to ride my bike this weekend. Well, not quite. It was a Friday, and it was 4 o'clock already, finished. My inspection is finished, but it's 4 o'clock. So of course, I can't get the sticker, right? And in Japan, you do not drive vehicles on the street without registration, inspection, all that. You just don't do it. In the US, we kind of get a little, you know, crazy, and we do it, you know, we get away with it on like country roads and things like that, but you don't do that in Japan. So here it is, 4:15 now, and they've already shut everything down. I cannot even get the sticker to ride the bike. I'm like, why don't they just go till 5, right? But that's how it is here. So yeah, basically I had to wait till next Monday, and then Monday at lunchtime just went up there and filed the paperwork, got my sticker. But that's a little bit about my experience with the inspections here. It's quite difficult, and you never know what you're going to fail from. I've had where I've had kind of not so good tires on the vehicle and it still passed, and they just didn't really look at it much, you know. I've had where they really checked everything so hard and looked at everything in detail, and then the wipers, or you know, like had a piece of rubber coming off them, they didn't even see that, and you know, I still passed. I've had it where the wheels were sticking out a little bit and it passed. And I've had it where they weren't hardly sticking out at all and they still said, oh, it failed. For the tires, they have a little string and it has a weight on the end, and they just drop it down beside the wheel to see if it touches. It's kind of weird, but anyway, that's my experience with the shotgun test in Japan, and that's a little bit about how it works. It's quite difficult and you can have a lot of problems with it, but the lucky thing about it is that it helps me pick up cars that, you know, maybe have some issues that are not a big deal for me, but would have been a big deal for the person who owned it previously. So anyway, that's a little bit about that. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. And as always, I appreciate you viewing my YouTube channel, and I look forward to making some new videos pretty soon. The shop here will be closing in Japan at the end of this month of November, and we will start having a few videos from Texas soon. I'll be heading there for the next couple of months while I work over there. So I look forward to seeing your comments, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you.